I had the opportunity to go to the Tampa Bay Super Bowl.
Oh, very cool. If people don't remember what Rolodexes were.
You're listening to EMS, hosted by Erik Axene.
40 million involved in human trafficking.
It's astronomical.
It's really, to me, it's hard to even understand it. I had no idea how big this problem was.
Bigger than the states of Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana all combined, plus 13 stadiums full of people at football games, right? That's the math that we put together.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And, I mean, you just look at the Super Bowl, for example. Usually about 100,000 people. Mm-hmm. Just being there. I had the opportunity to go to the Tampa Bay Super Bowl.
Oh, very cool.
A free ticket was given to me. I couldn't afford to buy those tickets are expensive. And I remember sitting there watching Tom Brady and Pat Mahomes battle it out. And it was really a lot of people. I mean, there's a ton of people. Imagining 13 of those stadiums is huge. But that's just the correction for our estimate of Texas, 30 million, and then another 10 million or so from Oklahoma and Louisiana, right?
Yep, plus all the stadiums that we just talked about. So, I mean, it's just
staggering.
It's a number that you just couldn't imagine seeing that many people all at once. It's just an incredibly large operation. And
so these folks involved in or victims of human trafficking, it's not just the sex trafficking industry. There's the forced work industry.
Absolutely. And then there's, so you have servitude, it's almost kind of like domestic, sort of help. Then there's, genuine slavery, and then this extends, in the research that I did, it extended all the way out into organ, harvesting, which is just terrible.
What percent of transplanted kidneys?
Potentially 1 out of every 5 transplanted kidneys in the world are brought by way of organ harvesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, even if a fraction of these things were true, it'd still be so concerning.
Yeah.
And by the way, thank you for your research on this. I know we have the best team here at ACE working on stuff, and to be able to share it in this environment here as a real big problem that we can help to maybe spread the word a little bit in our own way to help first responders and anybody at least understand that this is a huge problem. And what can you do about it is the question. And that's why I've been so impacted by what you did with all this research that you did, is that we, I think, are positioned in a unique environment to where we can actually maybe do something.
Everybody needs help sometimes from the medical arena, right? And so I think we're kind of that solvent that runs through the entirety of the community, no matter what social demographic, no matter what your, race, color, creed, religion, socioeconomic group, you name it. Like, people get sick, people get hurt, people need help. And I think that's kind of, our unique place in society to be able to do this. And we got into this industry to help people. And what a huge win, to pull someone out of slavery. I mean, how many people can say they've done that? It'd be an incredible, thing to carry with you, to know that somebody's life is that much better because of something you did.
That's one of the things I love about being an ER doctor is in the ER, you said it. You said it great, and I'll try to say it as good as you did, but or would it be as well as you? What's the grammar there? I don't even know.
Gooder.
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 So I'll try to say it gooder than. No, one of the things I love about being in the ER is that it really doesn't matter what the religion is. It doesn't matter socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter to the ER doctor, what where you live or what your sexual orientation is or anything. And really, all that stuff kind of goes out the window.
Yeah.
Really, what matters is helping people where they are and trying to make them whole. You come in with a sore stomach, we want to make sure you don't have appendicitis. You come in with a headache, we want to make sure you don't have, maybe a head bleed or whatever. And what's really cool is that with that environment that we have, one of the things that I will tell people when I talk about my job and why I like it so much is that sometimes I get patients a lot of times, and you've experienced this with me, handling the same patient together, is the patient will confess to us, I hate going to the doctor. And they're the type of patients that will never go, but because they had an emergency, here they are in the healthcare environment, and I can be a doctor for somebody who hates doctors.
Oh yeah.
And I actually kind of like that. I don't know. That's kind of unique in the healthcare industry. If you hate doctors, you probably will never see a primary care doctor, but you might see the ER doctor.
Yeah, and I think that extends all the way out to the pre-hospital environment, and it's the same thing. People get hurt out in the community, or in their homes, and they need help. And I think it's one thing to like talk equality. It's like another thing to be in a role where you constantly get to live that out. Every day you wake up, if you're rolling around on a rig or you're stepping into an ER to work, you're going to have people from all sorts of backgrounds, and it's on you to step in there and be effective. And I think this is a target population that in many cases is forgotten about. As we dug into these statistics, we talk about all the drug use and patients that would aggravate us to no end, the drug abusing pregnant ladies, the psych cases, the unreasonable PTSD guy or gal, these very well may be the people that are actively engaged in these situations. And I love that we use the color cards, the colorblind test cards, because it brings that element to where it's like, if we're not, we may not even see it if we're not looking for it, and I think that's to be a very good approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's something also about being in the first responders environment. Mm-hmm. I as a medical director, when I started getting into this 10, 15 years ago, I was astounded at the percentage of refusals. Mm-hmm. About a third of all the patients that we were seeing in the municipalities where I was a medical director, about a third of patient encounters ended up being a refusal. So even in the ER, we don't get a full view of these folks that our paramedics are touching. A large portion of them never get to the ER. So I think our first responders are even in a better position to identify potential human trafficking.
Yeah, the people that refuse are more likely to be the victims of trafficking to begin with, and so that's, it's already, an amplified exposure to this demographic that we would never see inside of a brick and mortar structure.
Before we get too deep in here, I think one thing that you so impressed me with was, when you signed on to ACE way back when the earth was young. When you signed up and helped to be part of our team, you've got an extensive background in the military. Not only are you just a fabulous provider in the ER, but you have a real rich history with education and with the military. And I think I see some of that coming through when you started to prepare this content. You really I don't know. To me, I viewed what you were doing is almost like you're fighting against this evil, human trafficking, and I had no idea what you were going to show me when we tasked this to you to do the human trafficking stuff. I had no idea how. It literally almost knocked me out of my chair as I was reading what you'd researched. It was really phenomenal.
It's a dragon that needs to be slayed, and I think that, it's great to look at it, for what it is, something that we need to crush in any way, shape, or form we can, and even if we can't, defeat it to make it go away, anybody that we can pull out of it, it's just a fantastic thing to do for somebody.
Yep. And I'll be completely honest and transparent. Here I am, a Caucasian male who is a physician, live in a nice neighborhood in a nice part of town. Growing up, we didn't always have a lot of nice stuff, I remember as a kid, but I'm very, very grateful for the things that I have and have, here with our family or whatever. And we both, this is a nice area that we live in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for me, that's another reason why I think what you showed me in your research was, again, I think, really important just for me as a human being to understand what's happening in my backyard.
Yeah, for me, I'm from God's country in the hills of West Virginia, and I am far removed from that now. Living in the suburbs of Texas, the DFW area, and it's been a long time, since I've been back home. I did 20 years in the Army and retired. Since that's between where I am now and where I came from, but looking at this material, it kind of brought it to me that, oh my goodness, like I saw what would qualify, as these definitions of human trafficking, even as a kid, like it was really startling because like, what a lot of people think, and to include the victims of this, what a lot of them would think are just their set of circumstances, believe it or not, are human trafficking by definition, like in a crime, and that people have resources that can help them, and they would be totally oblivious to it if nobody stepped up to help them.
Oh, that's a really good point. I think what I'm reminded of as I listen to you and reflect on my own experiences is that we kind of see things sometimes through our own lenses, right?
Yeah.
And it's good, like with the colorblind stuff that we talked about, sometimes it's good to really pull all those filters off and look at a situation, identifying what you see as being a potential warning sign to where you might be dealing with a victim of a human trafficking situation where you leave those filters on and your own experience can help you maybe almost distract you to assume certain things that aren't true.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think when we go down this list of things that stand out that people are at a risk for, like if we have an environment where somebody is dressed starkly different from the person that's speaking on their behalf, or somebody lives in a group setting, or where they don't have access or control to their documents or employment contracts, or we have people that get food brought to them and it's junky food and they don't do any of their own shopping. These things independently of one another could just be, a cultural variant, things that exist in society without any of these stressors. But you start to see a bunch of them put together. It's not, you're not making a RICO case for taking somebody, ripping somebody out of a situation, but it's enough correlated data to make you start asking real questions that matter, which is like, hey, are you safe at home? Do you, are you being forced to do this against your will? Are you trading sex for drugs? These sorts of questions can maybe connect us to, being able to really help somebody out.
And I think depending upon your experience, you being a military guy, you have a different perspective. I'd pick up on things I would miss because I don't have that experience. That's one of the reasons I love working with Matt. And normally Matt's on our show, and thank you for filling in for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is awesome. But Matt and I, when we work together in developing a content for firefighters, if left to my own devices as an ER doc, I kind of see things a certain way and I go a certain direction. But when Matt and I work together, having his firefighter perspective helps me to kind of gauge where we're supposed to go. We change our trajectory. We work together to produce something that's actually, applicable and valuable to a firefighter. Some of the stuff we do in the ER doesn't really matter in the ambulance because we can't do those things in an ambulance.
You can't CT somebody in the back of an ambulance,
And I think the same thing is happening here today. As you did this research, your military background, it gives me this unique perspective on what's just such a terrible evil that's happening right here. In Dallas, where we live, is one of the worst places for human trafficking.
Yeah, there was just a 40-person bust within the last week right here in Frisco, Texas, one of the, more affluent, communities in the country, let alone the state. And so it's here, and it's in the rurals as well. When I was in the Middle East, I got to see it firsthand, as far as you have countries where, everybody in the country is wealthy because they have a great, domestic, resource at their are exporting. And well, if everyone's a millionaire, who's going to be the labor? And so they use some of these things that I research, as far as, debt, bondage, and things of that nature, and they bring people over. And the day you show up, you're already in debt because you had to pay for your trip.
Oh, wow.
And then they feed you every day. And so you're only earning, a very small amount a day. And then if you want to leave, you haven't been here long enough, you haven't earned enough money for your trip back. And so they can, they play these games. And these guys are working in many cases, unfortunately, in dining facilities, serving food to, coalition troops and Kuwait and things of that nature. And, it was kind of eye-opening to kind of see that play out in a foreign country where it's all structured and institutionalized. But we have some of that even running on, these things get uncovered in the United States every day, and it's just shocking.
Well, I think that part of the problem for me personally in learning what I learned from you is that I assumed I knew human trafficking was happening here. I knew that, and I'd heard about how even our local mall out here is a kind of a hotbed for kidnapping kids, and somehow connected to the sex industry. And as a parent, I was more careful in letting my kids go to the mall alone, kind of a thing, right? But I think that the bigger part of the problem, that's probably out there in these forced work camps, but a lot of it's right in our own backyard. I didn't understand that until I saw what you'd prepared.
Yeah, learning about even how some of these job sites are, under the table, people trying not to contract licensed and bonded people. Not that there's anything wrong with, a Joe Blow handyman, but setting, where people have these work environments where there's no sort of safety regulations and the workers are all kind of brought from one house, one location.
Right.
It's everywhere, and we have to be on the lookout for these sorts of things. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're never going to know to ask. And if you never ask, you're never going to get, an answer that would key you into taking some steps, to kind of help somebody out.
Well, that might be a great segue into talking a little bit about some of those red flags we can look for. I know obviously we put together a lecture, but here in a podcast format, as we talk about these things, what sort of things would you say would be the highlights of common flags to look for in the pre-hospital environment? Like, what would you say would be something that our viewers could take away?
Well, I think in the sexual arena, the commercial sex community, you'd be looking for, a lot of people get caught up in, 1970s movies where, guys are running around wearing, high-class suits with canes and, feathers in their hat, stereotype of a pimp, and so I think that I'd be seeing somebody like that, but really what, it turns out is you just have people that are well-dressed, dressed really nice, like you or I would be on any day, next to somebody, speaking on behalf of somebody, maybe transporting somebody who doesn't even, have basic clothing items, they don't have shoes on, or they're wearing extremely provocative clothing, if I was, sitting next to my sister and my sister is dressed like that, I'd take my jacket off and like, you're putting this jacket on, like you represent our family, no way. But there it's like, oh yeah, that's my sister. And it's like, well, your sister looks like she's dressed to, pick people up on the street, because that's probably what's going on. And so looking for those things, looking for people who are moving en masse from one location to another, the living situation's constantly changing to avoid detection, people who are being dropped off on the street during evening hours, these sorts of things are pretty commonplace, and the concept of freelance prostitution is really not all that common. A lot of these people that are involved in prostitution are connected to someone who's managing it, and that is, by definition, commercial sex. Then there's also the forced labor thing, where you have, multiple people, maybe foreign born, don't have access to their documents, They're very shy and elusive when you ask them questions, not making eye contact.
Right.
Some of them can be very timid about being deported. These would be, red flags. People who are working in extremely unsafe environments. During the podcast, not podcast, but the lecture series, you had brought out, that the pre-hospital people are the only ones that are going to see those environments. When you walk in there, you say, this should have a respiratory protection program. These guys don't have lockouts and tagouts. Common things that that anybody that's working in with electricity, high environments, respiratory threat environments.
Yeah.
Things that fire service people are very familiar with. Because the safety element is so strong there, they don't see that there. And when you ask the workers about it, they have no clue what you're talking about. And it's like, do you guys have like work contracts? And they don't have access to any sort of work contracts. They're like, no, it's not like that. We don't get paid like that. These are all, community flags of servitude or slavery. They don't define it. They don't outline it. They don't guarantee it. So it'd be wrong to just assume that that's what's going on. You may have somebody that's just silly, who's just unsafe, who's just, doesn't really understand their work environment all that well. Somebody connected them to a job, but it should definitely prompt us when we have those opportunities to ask the questions, and then we can be effective.
And that, again, I'm looking at your hat, ACE. You got the ACE, our logo, right? But you also built an acronym to help give us something simple and easy to remember if we ever find ourselves in a situation where the danger bells are going off and red flags are flying, and you're thinking, wow, this looks like it could be a human trafficking victim. So it's nice to have a simple approach, ACE. Maybe we should walk through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step in that is just to ask and not assume. And so you want to say, hey, ask the questions that matter. Are you unsafe in your environment? Do you actually get paid for the work that you do? Does this money go into a bank account? Does money get taken away from you? For not doing certain things certain ways, just kind of arbitrarily, and those things would kind of give you a clue as to what's going on. And as the C in that would be to call, and sometimes for a pre-hospital environment, that call is just to the hospital to say, hey, we're coming with somebody that we feel may be caught up in a trafficking scenario. So if you can, there's plenty of community resources that, I think everyone should be aware of, and you should be able to reach out to contact. But if you don't have those, just calling to get the green light to change environments, and get more detailed questions, and which would help facilitate the E, which would be to escape, or transport that patient off scene, away from the threat environment, away from their captor, for lack of a better term. To get them to a hospital and let the hospital people know, let us know in the ER, hey, I think this person's being trafficked, and we can exclude people from coming back to be there. We can ask real questions, and then we can get help on board before they even get released. And so doing, this simple approach, this, ACE approach, it's just the things that need to happen when somebody's ready to get out of those environments. And that may not always be the case. People may not want to go with you. They may refuse transport, and everybody's got their state laws and their departmental restrictions on who they can transport. But if you recognize somebody's in a trafficking situation and they agree to transport, what an opportunity.
And you actually brought up something which I was not aware of, is that there are a lot of folks in the human trafficking industry who don't even know they are.
Yeah, absolutely. They have no clue because they, some of these folks, they come across the border and they came across with a work plan, and they immediately got enrolled into a slavery, situation, a servitude situation, or maybe they were sold that they were going to live with somebody and work out of a house and work off some debt, but maybe got immediately moved into a sex trafficking thing, and these folks, don't have a clue that there's resources out there to help them because they're not even familiar with our system and our way of life, in this community. And so there's that group of people. And then, like I said, I'm from the hills of West Virginia, not a lot of people are aware that there are agencies that are out there. The first time I heard the term human trafficking, it was absolutely silly to me, that two innocuous words could come together to be a dragon that needed to be slayed, that it was a terrible thing. And if human trafficking sounds silly to even me at the time, what does assistance for human trafficking sound like to somebody who's living in a remote setting that maybe doesn't have access to all the media and communication and hubbub about this problem?
And what do we do? It's such a huge problem. I like how you outlined the ACE kind of an approach to the scene. I think that's what we called it. Approach on scene.
Yeah, the actions on scene.
Actions on scene. Yeah, I love that. But I think it's more that we can do too. I think in communicating within our departments and having an organized approach, or somebody, at least a point of care person within the department who keeps up to date with resources and potential numbers or people that could be a resource to potential victims.
Yeah, I think being the guy, for your department is super easy. It's as easy as reaching out to the local resources that are available. Every state and most states within regions, they have offices, that are for the sex trafficking or the human trafficking divisions of police departments, task forces of this nature, and then those guys have a massive Rolodex. If people don't remember what Rolodexes were, the old lineup of cards where they've got resources that are available to them, and then you can connect with some of these resources. Community churches. When I was in Nevada, for example, in Reno, there was an organization there that had dudes that had firearms and aid bags, and these guys were tactical geared out. These were community citizens that would roll on a house and rescue people that wanted to get pulled out of there.
Wow.
And so not that I'm encouraging anything like that, but just that the resources that are available to you in your community, if you have somebody that's just intimately familiar with those things in your department or even on your shift, that could be the person where you're just like, hey, reach out to Bobby and just tell him that I have a concern here. What resources do I give this lady? And what an opportunity. And some of these people, you may only be able to just slip a note in their pocket. You may be able to just hand them a torn piece of paper that just has, if you want to get out, this is a number you call.
Right.
And, they may tell you, they may refuse treatment, but you never know. The next time that person hits the street, they may reach out and, you would never even know it. But if you're not there pushing the envelope, trying to reach out to these folks, you're just not going to be able to make that difference.
Well, the environment's changing too. Right now, I know with Medicare dollars, they're starting to develop different ways to treat and triage patients where historically we've only transported them to the ER, and that's the way we've generated revenue for our departments. But now we have these other potential income streams where we're actually in as a paramedic, you could be the person delivering the definitive care for a patient. So if your department does ET3, for example, you could potentially be that last person. There's no fallback in the ER now, where the ER can take care of it and help this patient that I'm suspicious of. You actually could potentially be the last person seeing that patient. So I think the environment is changing where this sort of thing is going to be more and more important for our departments to understand and for our paramedics to understand. So this is a real problem. And man, I've really enjoyed learning a lot from you with the research you've done. Thank you for joining us here today. And I know Matt appreciates you stepping in for him.
Yeah, it's been fun. A little life in the shoes of Matt for the day.
This has been really good. I really learned a lot. I hope our viewers have as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been, I think it's something that's had a positive impact on my practice. I change the way that I do things when I put together these lectures, and I'm grateful for that.
Me too.
I'm more aware, and I hope that we were able to do some good here in the community.
Thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be safe out there.
Yeah, you too. And that's all I have to say about that.